What is good, guys? This is Shields. Welcome back. We are going to react to today the greatest Asian dynasties, the top 10 countdown. This is believed by UsefulCharts. We love UsefulCharts. Go and subscribe to them. They have great content. We did a week or so ago, we did the top 10 countdown for the greatest European dynasties, and they were very much focused on royalty, like the Habsburgs, the Mountbattens, I'm forgetting, but there was a bunch of them, right? The same people that are King Charles is ruling today was part of one of those dynasties, and you know whether it be Italy, Spain, Great Britain, France, and of course can't forget Holy Roman Empire and so many more. There was a ton of great empires that kind of lasted such a long time. This video is actually came from one of our commenters. Recommended this video. This is probably, I've been trying to here and there this year really learn more about Eastern culture and history. Me being from the West myself, the United States, I kind of like, you got to look back through like the breadcrumbs of where my ancestors came from, and of course I know pretty much in terms of a lineage that most of my ancestry came from Norse colonies and or the British Isles. So, a lot of things that I immediately interest myself in are things around that nature, as well as the European continent. However, I care super deeply about each continent and each particular people's, whether it be history, culture, or anything in between. So today, what we got is we have the top 10 Asian dynasties. I believe heavily that we're going to be looking at particularly China for the most part, but maybe Asian also goes into India and Japan as well. I'm thinking those are the big three. Korea could also be huge. I'm not sure. I have a little bit of knowledge and more ignorance around this topic. So this is more of a learning video for me, as I hope it's learning for you. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Hit that like button. Let's go.
So I posted a video on this channel in which I counted down the 10 greatest European royal houses of all time. Well, today I'm going to do the same thing, but this time for Asia.
I have no idea.
Like in the previous video, I'll
so they might cover like parts of the Middle East there.
Only be including dynasties from the medieval and modern periods, and I'll be basing
no ancient dynasties. Interesting.
Things on 3 criteria. The first is longevity. So this is simply the total number of years that the dynasty held on to power. The second is size. For this, I used the total land area that the dynasty controlled at its maximum extent. Finally, I came up with a rough measure of the dynasty's overall influence on world history by asking 8 fellow history YouTubers to serve as judges.
I'll have to go check out all those channels that you just showed right there.
You can find a full list of the participating YouTubers.
We'll look at that.
YouTubers in the description, along with links to their channels. I definitely encourage you to check them out. Number 10, the House of Chakri.
Interesting. So is this the Siamese? Okay.
This house is one of only 2 on the list that are still reigning today. In this case, in the Kingdom of Thailand, formerly known as Siam. It may not be the largest country in Asia, but it is notable in that it has survived as an independent entity for almost 800 years, although the current ruling dynasty has only been ruling for 238 of
only 238 years have been in power. Like, geez, that's crazy. We just did a video on the presidency of the United States, and it would be just insane to think. I mean, 238 years is like the entire existence of the United States. It says 1782 to present. Imagine the Washingtons, which he wasn't even president yet in 1782. Imagine the Washingtons ruling for that long. Insane.
Those years. And when I say independent, I mean truly independent. There are only a handful of countries in the entire world that were not colonized or at least controlled by a
Mostly the British and the Dutch in this area.
European power at some point. Thailand is definitely one of those countries. And for that, I agree that they deserve
And I wonder why that is. Why specifically this country was not.
a place in the top 10. Number 9, the House of Chola.
Okay, so Chola, we got 431 years. It's insane. But a lot of India and Sri Lanka and some of the isles off this area in the Indian Ocean.
This is the only true Indian dynasty to make the top 10 list.
Interesting.
And take note that it's from South India. This is because for most of the medieval and modern period, North India was ruled by foreign dynasties. Of the many Hindu dynasties from South India, I would argue that the Cholas were the greatest. This is because they did not only rule over a good portion of the Indian subcontinent, they also expanded their rule to include many islands in Southeast Asia as well. In fact, their empire stretched far beyond the borders of this map. Now, it's difficult to come up with an exact number for the area that they controlled, but suffice to say, it was pretty large. It's also difficult to come up with an exact number for their longevity. This is because their roots stretch all the way back to ancient times, with the first historical mention of the Cholas dating to around 300 BCE. So it's possible that the dynasty lasted for about 1,000 years. However, we only have good records for this dynasty from the 9th century onwards.
I love their flag, the Bengal tiger, in like a pounce motion. I imagine if those were raised on ships, it would be a formidable sight seeing that coming at you.
So that gives them a verifiable length of 431 years. Still pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Number 8, the House of Yi.
House of Yi. Joseon. Yeah, I've been researching a little bit in this area specifically. The Korean Peninsula, like it was very divided. I was researching more or less like in the years between 1 AD and 1000 AD. It's such a divided area. It kind of just went back and forth through different over like 50-year spurts. So let's jump into Yi.
This Korean dynasty is often referred to as the Choson dynasty.
Choson. I've been saying Yoson. Choson.
But Choson was actually the name of the kingdom, not the house. The house name was in fact Yi, and it replaced the House of Wang, which was the house that ruled the previous.
And I know I'm pausing so much, but I'm just genuinely curious. I wonder how much of this history is embedded within museums in these lands. For example, it shows Hamhung, North Korea. So like in North Korea, in Pyongyang, is there like some sort of like, reference to this?
Korean kingdom, Goryeo. Of these two major Korean dynasties, Wang and Yi, Yi lasted slightly longer, its total time on the throne being 518 years. Although for some of that time, it was basically a vassal state. First of the Qing dynasty of China, and then later of the Empire of Japan. But it was the House of Yi, back when Choson was a strong independent kingdom, that produced Korea's greatest king, Sejong the Great, who, among many other contributions, is notable for personally inventing Hangul, the writing system still used in Korea today.
That's insane. And I think Korea, isn't Korea the largest language in terms of words? I might be crazy when I'm thinking this, but I think I saw somewhere Korea has the most words of any language.
Number 7. The House of Isinjuelua. Better
We're just gonna say you got it. I there's no way I'm about to pronounce that. I am too Western for that. But we will try. Let's try it one more time.
Number 7. The House of Isinjuelua.
Isinjuela. Did I say that right?
Number 7. The House of Isinjuelua.
Oh, there's like some rolling going on. Isinjuela. See, I can't do it. And I would say, if I looked at this without any pronunciation help, I would look at it and say Asian Giero. Something like that. Yeah. All right, so Manchuria, most of China, a little bit of modern day Mongolia, up into Korea, so even the Russian area. 276 years.
Better known as the Qing dynasty.
Qing.
Okay, here we've taken a giant leap in terms of size, power, and influence. The first few houses on this list were really only important at a regional level. But starting with this dynasty, we're going to be dealing with royal houses that impacted a much larger portion of the continent. So, of all the various Chinese dynasties, the Qing dynasty was actually the largest in terms of land area. And although I just said Chinese, I should point out that the Qing dynasty wasn't actually Chinese. Although they ruled China, the house itself originated in Manchuria, which is just north of the traditional Chinese territory.
Right.
This is why the Qing dynasty is also sometimes called the Manchu dynasty. Not only was the Qing dynasty the largest dynasty to rule China, though, it was also the most recent and, in fact, ruled China up until around the start of World War I.
That's insane.
Number 6. The House of Timur Babur.
Okay, so now we're kind of like in the Middle East into intercontinental regions from Turkey to India. Timur Babur. So this is going to be interesting. I'm trying to. Uzbekistan is where capital was, modern day Uzbekistan. Interesting.
Patrilineally, the House of Babur was directly descended from the House of Timur. So that's why I've grouped these two together as a single entry. The founder was Timur, also known as Timur the Lame or Tamerlane. He conquered Persia, and his descendants continued to rule there for over 100 years. But then, after their fortunes fizzled out in the Middle East, one of his great-great-great-grandsons, named Babur, managed to conquer a good portion of North India instead. Thus was born the Mughal Empire, which eventually expanded to include much of South India as well, and which lasted up until the British takeover, although by that point its emperors were mostly just symbolic.
Okay, so kind of like monarchies are today.
The Mughal Empire is also notable in that it was one of the richest empires in all
Are they responsible for the Taj Mahal?
of world history. Its emperors had way more wealth than the great French King Louis XIV, who was their contemporary. The Mughals
That's insane.
are, of course, also the ones who built the famous Taj Mahal. Number 5. The House of Osman.
Okay, so we're in the Ottoman Empire. You can't not include this.
Rulers of the Ottoman Empire, based out of what is today Turkey. One of the greatest Islamic dynasties of all time, they are notable for being the ones who finally conquered Constantinople, bringing an end to the Eastern Roman Empire,
Not talked about enough in terms of a historical moment, but yeah.
which had lasted well over 1,000 years. They also were one of the few Asian dynasties to capture and hold on to a good portion of European territory for several centuries. In total, they reigned for 623 years and ruled over 5 million square kilometers at
Wow.
their peak. Not too shabby.
And 1683 was their peak.
In my European video, a lot of people wondered why the Ottomans did not show up in the top 10 European royal houses. Well, being that the house originated on the Asian continent, I felt that they belonged more appropriately here. So here they are. Number 4, the House of Li.
House of Li. Okay, so we're in the Middle Ages, 618 to 907. We have 2 stints here. So there was a 690 to 705 gap. Interesting how they have like that little corridor that they have right there. But yeah, let's keep going.
Better known as the Tang Dynasty. This is the highest ranking Chinese dynasty on my list, and indeed, many historians consider it to be the greatest.
Okay, I wonder how he's only going back to like Middle Ages, right? So interested to see who's the top 3 are.
Chinese dynasty of all time. An argument could perhaps be made for the earlier Han Dynasty, but
Like, yeah, in BC times.
that was an ancient dynasty.
Yeah.
And as I said at the beginning, this video is limited to the medieval and modern dynasties only. Although the Tang Dynasty was not the largest or longest ruling of the many Chinese dynasties, it was certainly the most influential, and it served as the model for all the various imperial dynasties that followed it, not only in China, but in other countries as well. In fact, the period in which the Tang Dynasty ruled China is considered to be one of China's 2 golden ages, the other being the Han Dynasty.
Yeah.
Number 3, the House of Yamato.
$14.81. It's gonna be hard to top this, but there's 2 apparently that top it. Oh my god. Whew.
Also known as the Imperial House of Japan. So it was really difficult to rank the final 3 houses on this list. Really, I could have just said that it was a 3-way tie for the top spot.
I was figuring
I
that.
resisted the temptation and I went ahead and tried my best to rank them. But keep in mind, things were really close between the top 3. If we were basing things only on longevity, the House of Yamato would win, hands down. Not only is it the longest reigning dynasty in Asian history, it is the longest reigning dynasty in all of world history.
Insane.
And surprisingly, it is still reigning today. If we go by legend, this dynasty is almost 2,700 years old. But I'm not going to go by legend. I'm going by historical dates only. So by that measure, this house, in its patrilineal line, has been reigning for 1,481 years. Wow. Now, for most of that time, the territory controlled by Japan was limited to the main Japanese islands.
And they were isolationists. Is that why you put them 3?
Not the vast area shown on this map. The maximum extent you see here is the
World War II.
Empire of Japan during World War II. It's also important to note that throughout most of Japanese history, the emperor did not actually hold much power. Just like today, the emperorship was often more of a ceremonial position. For many centuries, a military leader known as the shogun was the real leader of Japan. But because this royal house has held on so long, I think they definitely deserve to be in the top 3.
I agree. Okay, so number 2 and 1. They gotta be in the Middle East, right?
Number 2, the House of Quraish. This is the house of the Prophet Muhammad, although in this case the word tribe would be a better term. Patrilineally, this dynasty also includes all of the Umayyad caliphs as well as all of the Abbasid caliphs. Although they are often seen as being 2 separate dynasties, both the Umayyads and the Abbasids do trace their paternal line to a single common male ancestor. a man named Fir ibn Malik, also known as Quraish. The current royal house of Jordan and Morocco also trace their origins to Quraysh, but since the exact lines are not verifiable, I haven't included them in the totals. So this dynasty may not be the longest lasting in Asian history, although at 626 years it certainly did last long, nor was it the largest in terms of land area. Although, again, at 11 million square kilometers, it was certainly not small. But this dynasty certainly wins hands down when it comes to lasting influence. Considering the influence that Islam still has on Western Asia after 1400 years, not to mention the rest of Asia and much of Africa and other parts of the world as well, the quote-unquote House of Quraysh definitely deserves one of the top spots.
So, number one, I've been thinking about it while he's been talking. It's got to be the Khan, right? It's got to be Mongolian rule.
Number one, the House of Borjigin. This was the house of the great Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
And when you look at the amount of territory that this one family conquered, it's really no surprise that they ended up in the number one spot. At a maximum size of over 24 million square kilometers, the Mongol Empire was the largest land-based empire ever. Not just in Asia, but in the world. Technically, the British Empire was larger, but the British Empire was non-contiguous, meaning that it was spread out over a bunch of different areas that didn't actually share a border. The Mongol Empire eventually split into four main parts. The Golden Horde, which included parts of Eastern Europe, the Ilkhanate, based in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate, which was the longest lasting of the four, and the Great Khanate, better known in Chinese history as the Yuan dynasty.
That was around the time of Marco Polo.
But even though the Yuan dynasty eventually fell to the native Chinese Ming dynasty, it continued to rule in Mongolia for several more centuries. So not only did this royal house conquer a lot of territory, it also managed to survive for a decent amount of time. And it was no small player in terms of influence either. The Mongols were basically responsible for strengthening the connections between East Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, both in terms of the transmission of culture, but also of real physical DNA and biological disease. It could be said that the Mongol invasions paved the way for the Black Death, which in turn paved the way for the European Renaissance, which in turn paved the way for the modern age in which we still live. So, yeah, the Mongols are pretty darn important. And while I'm on the topic of the Mongols, it is often said that around 10% of all men living in the parts of Asia that were once part of the Mongol Empire, which is most of Asia, are the direct male line descendants of Genghis Khan. This is, in fact, true.
Wow.
But it gets even more impressive. Keep in mind that that 10% figure only refers to direct male line descendants. If we were to count females and female line descendants, the number would go up very close to 100%. If you're curious to learn more about why this is, I'd recommend you watch my video entitled, Is Everyone a Descendant of Royalty?, which I'll link to in the description.
We gotta watch
Finally,
that.
I'll point out that there is a possibility that the Timurid and Baburid dynasties that I mentioned earlier are actually part of this one large Borjigin dynasty. However, since those connections are not historically verifiable, I put them separately and ranked them separately.
Okay.
So there you have it.
That's insane, guys. That's insane. I figured the Mongol Empire, since we're not going back to like the Han Dynasty and everything, I think I learned a little bit today. What about you? Very interesting. I want to dive even deeper into Eastern culture and history as we continuously learn together. If you're about that, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.